You think Victorian shopkeepers had it easy. You're imagining cheerful, rosy-cheeked fellows in leather aprons, whistling while weighing out tea leaves, closing at a reasonable hour and retiring to a cosy fireplace. Nothing could be further from the truth. For most shopkeepers, it was a brutal, exhausting existence where one wrong delivery or unexpected heatwave could financially ruin your entire family. While today we simply toss spoiled food in the trash, Victorian shopkeepers watched their livelihood literally rot before their eyes, fighting a daily battle against decay in a world without refrigeration. Let's find out now why owning that quaint little shop on the corner was actually a waking nightmare. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. All right, let's head back to Victorian England. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. So congratulations, you just woke up in 1870s London. It's 4:30 in the morning and your eyes blink open to absolute darkness. The small bedroom above your shop is freezing cold, the coal fire having died hours ago. Your back aches from the lumpy straw mattress, nothing like your memory foam one at home. The sour smell of yesterday's milk mingles with the smoky London air seeping through poorly fitted windows. Somewhere nearby, a horse and cart clatter over cobblestones. There's no hitting snooze, no 5 more minutes. In fact, there's no alarm clock at all. You were jolted awake by your body's own internal clock, trained by years of pre-dawn risings. Your wife stirs beside you, already half awake herself. Neither of you speak. Words waste precious time, and there's far too much to do before opening at 6 a.m. The floorboards creak and groan as you swing your legs out of bed. They're swollen from standing for 16 hours yesterday and the day before and the day before that. You slip your feet into cold leather shoes without bothering with socks. You'll put those on after lighting the stove. Thomas, make sure you check the butter this morning, your wife mumbles, finally breaking the silence. Mrs. Crawford complained it was turning yesterday. You grunt in acknowledgement. The butter. Always the damn butter. Without ice, keeping it fresh in summer is a constant battle, one you're frankly tired of fighting. The small bedroom connects directly to an even smaller sitting room, which doubles as your oldest daughter's bedroom at night. She's already up, her makeshift bed on the settee folded away, boiling water on the small stove. At 12, she's essentially running the household upstairs while you and your wife manage the shop below. "Oh, morning, father," she whispers, careful not to wake the 3 younger children who share the only other bedroom. "Tea's almost ready." You nod, grateful. "Good girl, Emily. Get your brothers up in half an hour. We'll need Richard helping with deliveries this morning." The tea is weak. You're reusing yesterday's leaves. Can't afford to waste anything, not with how thin the profit margins are these days. The new fancy grocery down the street is stealing customers with their imported goods and flashy window displays. You take a sip and wince. It's bitter and lukewarm, but it'll have to do. With tea in your belly, it's time to face the day. First task, check yesterday's inventory and prepare the shop. You shuffle down the narrow staircase, unlocking the door that separates your living quarters from the shop below. The smell hits you immediately. That distinctive mix of cheese, cured meats, grains, and the faint undercurrent of whatever might be starting to spoil. You light a single oil lamp, keeping the flame low to save oil. In its dim glow, your kingdom reveals itself. Shelves lined with jars and canisters, barrels of flour and sugar against the wall, hooks overhead with hanging sausages and hams. It's a modest shop, but it's yours, mortgaged to the hilt, but yours nonetheless. First things first, you need to check what's about to turn. That's the daily gamble. What needs to be sold today or be lost forever. You head to the small back storeroom where it's slightly cooler, running your hands over the wheels of cheese. The cheddar seems all right, but the softer cheese has a suspicious sheen to it. You'll have to discount it today, push it on the factory workers who won't be as picky. The butter, as your wife feared, isn't looking good either. You take a small wooden paddle and work the top layer, scraping off the slightly rancid bit and mixing in a little salt, good as new, or close enough that most customers won't notice anyway. That's when you hear it, the distinctive clip-clop of hooves and the rumble of wheels. The delivery cart from the market. You quickly splash water on your face from the basin by the door, run your hands through your hair, and step out into the dark morning. "Morning, Mr. Gibbs," calls the delivery man, already unloading crates of vegetables. "Got your order. The potatoes look good, but the apples are dear this week. Terrible harvest down in Kent." "I ordered 2 crates of apples, Jenkins. Don't tell me they're charging more now." Your stomach tightens. You'd already advertised apple preserves in your window. Jenkins shrugs, unsympathetic. "Take it up with the market master. It's an extra shilling per crate." You hand over the money, gritting your teeth. There goes your profit on the preserves unless you raise the price, which might send customers to that fancy new grocery. It's a constant, delicate balance. By 5:30, your wife has joined you downstairs, hair neatly pinned beneath a cap, apron crisp and white. Together, you arrange the day's display, the fresher produce near the front, the items needing to sell quickly in the most visible spots. Your hands move quickly, practiced from years of the same routine. "The Miller account is due today," she says quietly, arranging carrots in a small pyramid, "and we need to pay the coal merchant." "I know." You try not to sound irritated, though anxiety gnaws at your stomach. The Millers are good customers, a respectable middle-class family who buy on credit, settling their bill monthly. If they pay today, you can cover the coal. If not, you'll have to dip into what you've been saving for Richard's apprenticeship fees. At precisely 6 a.m, you unlock the front door and flip the sign to open. The street outside is already alive with activity. Delivery boys running errands, servants sent to gather the day's provisions, workers heading to factories and shops. The early morning light filters through your recently cleaned windows, illuminating the Gibbs family grocery sign with its slightly faded gold lettering. Your first customer is Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper from the doctor's home down the street. She's an imposing woman who inspects everything with narrowed eyes and bargains ruthlessly. "Your carrots are looking rather limp this morning, Mr. Gibbs," she announces loudly, prodding them with a gloved finger. "Fresh in this morning, Mrs. Wilson, from the Essex farms." You smile tightly, aware that other customers are beginning to enter, can't have her putting doubts in their minds about your produce. I'll take a pound then, and I need a good cheese for the doctor's dinner party. Something to impress. This is your chance. That soft cheese that's beginning to turn needs to go today. "I've just received a beautiful Stilton, very fine. The doctor's guests will be most impressed." You lead her to the cheese counter, skillfully cutting a sample from the part that still looks perfect. She tastes it, considering. "How much?" You quote a price that's a penny higher than usual. She'll bargain you down to the normal price, thinking she's won, and you'll have successfully sold cheese that might have been waste by tomorrow. "Daylight robbery," she exclaims right on cue. "I'll give you 6pence less." You pretend to consider, then reluctantly agree. She looks triumphant as you wrap the cheese carefully in paper, then muslin cloth to keep it cool on her walk home. As Mrs. Wilson leaves, a rush of customers arrives, working men stopping for a bit of bread and cheese before their shift, mothers sending children for flour or sugar, a servant from one of the grand houses with a lengthy list of requirements. Your wife handles most of them while you deal with Mr. Crawford, a local businessman who buys only from you because you extend him credit. "Just the usual today, Gibbs," he says briskly, hardly looking up from the newspaper tucked under his arm. "And add a pound of those apples. They look decent." You mentally calculate his growing tab as you gather his items. He's slow to pay lately, but his business seems to be doing well, judging by his new waistcoat. You'll give him another week before mentioning the outstanding amount. By mid-morning, the shop is in full swing. Your daughter Emily has come down to help, serving the less demanding customers and running upstairs to mind the youngest child when needed. Richard, your 10-year-old son, is making deliveries to the houses too fine to send their servants to shop, a service you offer to compete with the fancy new grocery. The morning passes in a blur of transactions, each requiring different approaches. For the wealthy customers, you're deferential, calling them sir or madam, offering the finest products. For the working class mothers, you're more familiar, sometimes slipping an extra potato into their bag if they're regulars. For the factory workers, you're efficient and quick, knowing they have limited time for their midday meal break. All the while, you're calculating what's selling, what's not, what needs to be pushed before it spoils. Every penny counts, every sale matters. By noon, you're already exhausted, your feet throbbing, but the day is only half done. A commotion outside catches your attention. A crowd has gathered around a man with a cart handing out flyers. Your heart sinks as you spot the name on the side of his cart. Wilson's Superior Groceries, now with ice imported daily. Ice. The luxury you can't afford. With ice, they can keep meat fresh for days, sell butter that doesn't need constant reworking, offer milk that doesn't turn by afternoon. You take a flyer from a passing child, staring at the prices. They're undercutting you on nearly everything. "Don't fret," your wife says, appearing beside you. She takes the flyer and crumples it. "Our customers are loyal. They know us." You want to believe her, but loyalty is a luxury many can't afford either. If Wilson's is selling butter for a penny less because their ice keeps it fresh longer, allowing for larger bulk purchases at better prices, well, you can do the math. Just then, Richard bursts through the door, red-faced and breathing hard. "Father, the Millers said they can't pay until next week. Mr. Miller said to tell you he's most sorry, but there's been a delay with his own accounts." Your wife's face falls, though she quickly composes herself. The coal merchant will have to wait, again, and he charges interest on late payments. "It's fine," you lie, patting Richard's shoulder. "Go help Mrs. Crawford, she's looking for the good tea." But it's not fine. None of it is fine. As you turn back to the counter, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in the polished brass scale. When did those lines appear around your eyes? When did your posture begin to stoop? You're only 36, but look a decade older. A fly buzzes past your ear, landing on the butter. You shoo it away quickly, glancing around to make sure no customers noticed. One bad rumour about the quality of your goods could ruin everything. You mentally add fly papers to tomorrow's market list, another expense you can ill afford. As the midday rush begins, you push aside your worries. There's no time for that now. The shop is filling again. Housewives planning dinner, servants with last-minute requests from their employers, children sent with pennies clutched in their hands for sweets or small necessities. You paste on your shopkeeper's smile and reach for the flour scoop. 10 more hours until closing, 10 more hours of standing, serving, calculating, worrying, 10 more hours until you can climb those stairs again, fall into that lumpy bed and do it all again tomorrow. The bell above the door jingles as another customer enters. You look up, ready to assess their social status, their likely purchases, how to best make this transaction profitable. It's a constant performance, this role you play. Part merchant, part actor, part mathematician, all struggling to keep your head above water in the rising tide of competition and modernization. Just another day as a Victorian shopkeeper, and tomorrow promises to be exactly the same. The midday bell from St. Mary's Church rings out, barely audible over the bustling shop. You've been on your feet for 6 straight hours now, and your lower back has developed a dull, persistent ache that no amount of shifting weight helps. But there's no time to rest. The shop is packed, and every customer means coins in the till. 2 pounds of sugar, Mr. Gibbs, and none of that brown stuff, demands Mrs. Harrington, a banker's wife who always speaks as if addressing a particularly slow child. Last time it was simply crawling with insects. Certainly not, Mrs. Harrington, you assure her, reaching for the white sugar kept specifically for your better clientele. The brown sugar is actually the same quality. You buy it all from the same wholesaler, but you keep 2 separate barrels and charge the wealthier customers an extra penny per pound for the superior white. It's not dishonest, you tell yourself, it's just business. And I'll need vanilla for baking, she continues, adjusting her expensive gloves. The genuine article, mind you, not that chemical concoction you sold to Mrs. Peterson. You wince internally. The vanilla you sell is mostly tonka bean with a drop of actual vanilla essence, a common practice among grocers. Pure vanilla is ruinously expensive, and if you stocked only the real thing, you'd have to charge prices that would drive away half your customers. But Mrs. Harrington won't be fobbed off with substitutes, not after the incident with Mrs. Peterson's failed dinner party dessert that's been the talk of the neighbourhood for weeks. Or only the finest for you, madam, you say, reaching under the counter for a small bottle kept specially for customers like her. It costs you a small fortune, but the markup is substantial, and more importantly, it keeps her from taking her considerable business to Wilson's new shop. While your wife wraps Mrs. Harrington's purchases in brown paper and twine, you turn to your next customer, Mr. Finch, the school teacher. He's a particular favourite, educated enough for pleasant conversation, but living on a modest salary that makes him appreciate your more economical offerings. The usual today, Mr. Finch. I've just got in some lovely herrings, very reasonable. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs, but just the essentials today. End of the month, you understand? You do understand. Everyone's money gets tight by month's end, which is why you've arranged your deliveries so the best bargains arrive in the last week, ensuring steady business when many shopkeepers see a lull. As you measure out Mr. Finch's modest order of tea and flour, you keep one eye on your son Richard, who's serving a group of factory women on their lunch break. At 10, he's already a skilled shopkeeper, having grown up watching you and your wife. He knows to give the women quick service. They only have 30 minutes for their meal break, and to tactfully steer them toward the foods that need selling today. This cheese is a special price today, Mrs. Collins, he's saying to a tired-looking woman in a faded shawl. Father says it's particularly good with the day-old bread. You smile to yourself. The boys are natural. The cheese he's selling is the same one beginning to turn that you sold to Mrs. Wilson this morning, but at half the price, and he's pairing it with bread that would otherwise go stale. Nothing wasted, a modest profit made, and a working family gets an affordable meal. These small victories keep you going. The bell above the door jingles, and in walks Trouble in the form of Bertram Wilson, son of your new competitor and, judging by his smug expression, here on a reconnaissance mission rather than to actually purchase anything. Just browsing, he announces loudly, picking up an apple and examining it with exaggerated care before putting it down again. My father sent me to see if you had any of that new canned salmon everyone's talking about. It's a deliberate provocation. Wilson's Grocery has been advertising canned goods heavily, a luxury you can't afford to stock extensively because they tie up too much capital in slow-moving inventory. You have exactly 3 cans of salmon purchased as a trial, and they've been sitting on your shelf for weeks because they're simply too expensive for most of your customers. Indeed we do, young Mr. Wilson, you reply smoothly, gesturing to the small shelf where your modest selection of canned goods is displayed. Though our customers generally prefer fresh, perhaps your father finds cans necessary given how long his goods sit on the shelves. A petty dig, but satisfying. Young Wilson's face flushes as he stammers a reply and hastily retreats, the bell jangling discordantly as the door slams behind him. Your wife shoots you a look, half reproving, half amused. That was beneath you, Thomas, she murmurs as she passes with an armful of brown paper packages for delivery. So is spying on competitors, you reply, but you know she's right. The Wilsons make you uneasy. Their new shop, with its plate glass windows, polished brass fittings and modern amenities, represents everything you can't afford, a glimpse into the future of retail that might well leave shops like yours in the past. The thought is interrupted by a tug on your sleeve. It's Emily, your 12-year-old daughter, her face serious beyond her years. "Father, the milk's turning," she whispers, "and it's not even 1 o'clock. Your heart sinks. You'd gotten a good price on extra milk this morning, hoping to sell it to the afternoon tea crowd. But the unusually warm May day is accelerating the spoilage. Without ice or a proper cold room, you're fighting a losing battle against nature." "Right," you say decisively. "Tell your mother we're making custard. Get the eggs and sugar ready in the back. It's a gamble, but a calculated one. By cooking the milk now, you can salvage it, and custard will sell well as an affordable treat for children coming out of school later. Nothing wasted, the shopkeeper's mantra." Emily nods and hurries to the back room, which serves as your storage space, makeshift kitchen, and office all in one. Through the doorway, you can see your wife already at work, her capable hands moving quickly as she churns leftover cream into butter before it can spoil. The shop empties briefly after the lunch rush, giving you a moment to catch your breath and check the ledger. The morning sales have been decent, but not exceptional. You'll need a strong afternoon to make up for the extra you had to pay for those apples. You take the opportunity to rearrange the display, bringing forward the items that need to sell today. The bread from yesterday goes on a prominent special value board. The slightly wilted greens are arranged artfully to hide their decline, and the fish gets a generous sprinkling of lemon juice to mask the beginning of that not quite fresh smell. As you work, you mentally calculate what you'll need for tomorrow. The ordering never stops. Too much inventory ties up precious capital and risks spoilage. Too little means empty shelves and disappointed customers who might wander down to Wilson's instead. It's a daily high-wire act with no safety net. The back door opens, and in comes Billy, the butcher's boy, with your daily delivery of meat. In summer, you only order what you're confident will sell in a day. A small joint of beef for the wealthier households, some cheaper cuts and offal for working families, and sausages that you make last by adding a generous portion of breadcrumbs to the mix. "Mr. Peters says to tell you he can't do this price much longer," Billy announces, handing over a paper-wrapped package that immediately leaks a small spot of blood onto your counter. "Costs are up with the new regulations." You sigh. The recent food safety laws are well-intentioned, designed to prevent the horrific adulteration practices that saw everything from chalk in flour to copper sulfate in pickles, but they're squeezing small businesses like yours and the local butchers. The bigger shops can absorb the costs. You have to pass them on to customers who are already counting pennies. Tell him I understand, but I need until the end of the month before we adjust prices, you reply, slipping Billy a halfpenny for himself. The boy is a useful source of gossip about other shopkeepers' business, and the small bribes are worth it for the intelligence he provides. Oh, and Mr. Gibbs, Billy adds, pocketing the coin with practiced smoothness. Wilson's got a new ice delivery scheduled for tomorrow. One of them fancy American ice boxes, they're saying. Your stomach tightens. Ice is the great divider in the grocery business these days. With it, a shop can offer fresh meat, dairy, and produce for days. Without it, you're condemned to the daily scramble against spoilage that consumes so much of your time and eats into your profits. Thanks, Billy, you say, keeping your voice casual despite the anxiety blooming in your chest. Give my regards to Mr. Peters. The bell jingles again as the first of the afternoon customers arrive. Mrs. Miller, wife of the customer whose delayed payment is causing you so much financial juggling. She looks harried, a common expression for a woman with 5 children and a husband whose business success hasn't quite matched his social aspirations. Mr. Gibbs, I know William spoke to your boy about our account, she says, before you can even greet her, her voice low to avoid being overheard. It's just a temporary situation. My husband has several outstanding payments due to him. Think nothing of it, Mrs. Miller, you assure her. Though your landlord and the coal merchant won't be nearly so understanding. We've known each other too long to worry about a week here or there. Relief floods her face, and you know you've made the right decision, financially risky though it is. The Millers' account is substantial, and maintaining their loyalty is worth the short-term strain on your cash flow. You're too kind, she says. Now, I need a few things for dinner, something economical but nice enough for my husband's business associate who's joining us. This is where you excel, helping customers navigate their social and financial constraints. You guide Mrs. Miller toward a modest cut of meat that can be stretched with vegetables into a respectable stew, suggest an affordable but presentable cheese for after dinner, and throw in a small jar of your wife's homemade chutney on the house, a gesture that costs you little but generates immense goodwill. As she leaves, parcel tucked under her arm and clearly relieved to have managed a dinner that won't embarrass her husband, you feel a small glow of satisfaction. This is the part of shopkeeping you genuinely enjoy, being a fixture in your customers' lives, helping them through the small daily challenges of feeding their families and maintaining their social standing. The afternoon brings a steady stream of business. School children with pennies for sweets. You always give them a little extra if they look particularly hungry. Servants from the big houses on the hill buying last-minute ingredients for dinner. Working men stopping on their way home for tobacco or a bit of cheese for supper. Emily has taken over the task of weighing and wrapping, while Richard makes deliveries to the houses too far for customers to carry their purchases. Your wife has transformed the turning milk into perfectly good custard, now cooling in small earthenware pots that sell for 2p each, turning potential loss into modest profit. Around 4 o'clock, the shop momentarily empties and you seize the chance to deal with your most unpleasant task of the day. In the back room, you pull out the accounts book and begin the process of marking which customers are falling behind on their payments. Credit is both the lifeblood and the bane of your business. Without it, you'd lose half your customers who simply can't afford to pay cash for every purchase. With it, you're constantly juggling your own creditors while chasing payments from customers. Most pay eventually, but some accounts have been outstanding for months, and you'll need to make difficult decisions soon about who gets cut off. The names in the book tell stories of your neighbourhood, the once prosperous family fallen on hard times after the father's accident at the factory, the widow struggling to maintain appearances on a meagre pension, the young couple who always seem to spend just beyond their means. You know their secrets, their struggles, their moments of pride and shame. The shopkeeper sees it all. "Thomas," your wife calls from the shop, interrupting your calculations. "Mr. Crawford is here." Mr. Crawford, your most reliable source of gossip and your most unreliable payer of bills. You close the ledger with a sigh and paste on your shopkeeper's smile before heading back out front. "Ah, Mr. Crawford, just the man. I've been saving a special bit of ham for you. Just came in this morning." The ham is in fact from yesterday, but it's still perfectly good, and Crawford has an unfortunate tendency to forget quality once he starts talking. "Very decent of you, Gibbs. Very decent indeed," he says, puffing slightly as he leans on your counter. "Though I hear Wilson's is getting in ham direct from Yorkshire now. Supposed to be exceptional. Is that so?" you reply, keeping your tone mild while slicing the ham, with perhaps more force than necessary. "I hadn't heard. But then I source from farms I've known for 20 years. Quality one can trust, you know." Crawford nods absently, already moving on to his real purpose, sharing the latest neighbourhood news. "Speaking of trust, have you heard about young Thompson from the bank? Seems he's been cooking the books. They're hushing it up, of course, but my cousin's boy works as a clerk there and says—" You listen with half an ear as you wrap his purchase, nodding and making appropriate noises of surprise or concern. Crawford's gossip is occasionally useful for understanding which customers might be facing financial difficulties, but mostly it's the same tedious scandals and speculations that circulate through every neighbourhood. As Crawford finally pays, in cash, thankfully, his credit limit was reached months ago, and departs, you check the clock. 2 more hours until closing. Your feet are throbbing, your back is one solid knot of pain, and you've barely had a sip of water all day, let alone a proper meal. Emily appears at your side with a cup of tea and a small sandwich. Your wife's doing, no doubt. She knows you too well. "Mother says to eat something before you fall over," Emily says, her serious little face creased with concern, and Richard's back with word that the Petersons want their usual order delivered tomorrow, but they've added extra for a dinner party. Good news, the Petersons are wealthy and pay promptly. You nod, mouth full of bread and cheese, as you make a mental note to set aside the best produce for their order. The late afternoon brings the day's final rush, working men stopping for provisions on their way home, housewives making last-minute purchases for dinner, the occasional gentleman buying luxury items like cigars or imported spirits that you keep in a locked cabinet due to their value. Throughout it all, you and your family work in well-practiced harmony. Your wife charms the male customers with just the right balance of deference and friendly efficiency. Emily has mastered the art of suggesting additional purchases without seeming pushy. Richard handles the deliveries and heavy lifting, his small frame belying surprising strength built from years of hauling sacks and crates. As the clock approaches 6, you begin the subtle process of encouraging the lingering customers to make their final selections. Mrs. Bennet, notorious for spending 20 minutes to purchase a halfpenny worth of tea, is finally ushered out with gentle reminders about your closing time. The last customer leaves, and your wife turns the sign to closed with an audible sigh of relief. But the day is far from over. Now comes the counting of the till, the cleaning of counters, the covering of perishables, and the preparation for tomorrow. The shop may close to customers, but for you, there are still hours of work ahead. "Father," Richard calls from the back room, his voice tight with concern. "You'd better come look at this." You hurry to the back room, wiping your hands on your apron. Richard is standing by the storage shelves, pointing at something on the floor. Your heart sinks as you spot the small puddle forming beneath one of your pickle barrels. "Damn thing's leaking," you mutter, crouching to inspect the damage. The barrel is an old one, the wood beginning to warp after years of use. You should have replaced it months ago, but every spare penny has gone to stock or bills. "Is it ruined?" Richard asks, his young face pinched with worry. He understands, even at 10, that waste means loss, and loss means the precarious balance of your finances tips further toward disaster. "Not if we act quickly," you straighten up, mind already calculating. "Get the earthenware crocks from the top shelf. Emily, fetch your mother. We'll need to decant everything immediately." The next hour is a flurry of activity as your family forms a small assembly line. You carefully lift the heavy barrel while Richard and Emily position the crocks. Your wife, Sarah, ladles the pickled onions and their precious vinegar into the smaller containers. Her movements quick and precise. "We'll have to sell these faster now," she says, not looking up from her work. "Once they're out of the brine, they won't keep as long." "I know. You'll have to discount them, cutting already razor-thin margins even further. We'll promote them tomorrow. Special price this week only." It's the shopkeeper's constant dance, transforming potential disasters into opportunities, losses into sales. Nothing can be wasted. Not in this business where success or failure balances on pennies. By the time the pickle crisis is resolved, it's nearly 7 in the evening. The shop is clean, the day's takings counted and recorded in the ledger, and preparations for tomorrow are well underway. But there's still the matter of the books to settle. "Children, go up and start on supper," your wife says, her tone making it clear this isn't a request. "Your father and I need to review the accounts." Once they've gone upstairs, she pulls out the second ledger, the one that holds the true state of your business, the one the children don't see. "How bad is it?" you ask, not really wanting to hear the answer. Sarah runs a finger down the column of figures, her lips moving silently as she calculates. Unlike many shopkeepers' wives, she's quick with numbers, quicker than you, truth be told. In another life, she might have been a school teacher or even managed a business of her own. Instead, she's here, stretching pennies into pounds and somehow keeping your little ship afloat despite the rising tide of debts. "We're short for the landlord," she finally says. "Even if we put off the coal merchant again, we're still 7 shillings shy. 7 shillings might as well be £7 for all your ability to conjure it from thin air." You sit heavily on the rickety stool by the small desk, rubbing your temples where a headache has been building all day. "The Millers?" you ask, though you already know the answer. "If they'd paid today as promised, we'd be fine. But with them delayed..." She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. "What about the Harrises? They usually settle on Thursdays." Sarah shakes her head. "Mrs. Harris was in yesterday, said her husband's been laid off from the factory, asked for another week of credit just to keep food on the table. And, of course, you gave it to her. How could you not? The Harrises have 5 children, the youngest barely walking. Turn them away and they'll go hungry. It's not just business. It's your place in this community. These are your neighbours, not just customers. We could..." Sarah hesitates, then squares her shoulders. "We could sell my mother's brooch." "No." Your response is immediate and firm. The silver brooch is one of the few fine things she owns, a reminder of a time when her family had prospects before her father's business failed and she found herself working as a shop girl where you met her 20 years ago. We're not that desperate yet. Then what do you suggest? There's no anger in her voice, just the weary pragmatism that comes from years of similar conversations. You stare at the ledger as if the columns of careful handwriting might rearrange themselves into a more favourable configuration. We'll talk to Jenkins, you decide finally. Jenkins is your main supplier, the middleman between you and the wholesale market. Ask for extended terms on the next delivery. He owes us after that business with the bad flour last month. Sarah nods, but you can see she's unconvinced. Jenkins has his own creditors to satisfy, his own thin margins to protect. And you hesitate, knowing she won't like the next part. I'll pay a visit to Wilson tomorrow. Thomas, no. Her face hardens. Not him, anyone but him. It would just be a small loan to tide us over until the millers pay. He'd love nothing more than to get his hooks into us. He's been trying to buy out every small shop on the street. Her voice drops to a whisper, though the children are well out of earshot. The Parkers took a loan from him last year. Now he owns their bakery in all but name. You know she's right. Wilson is a predator disguised as a benefactor, offering seemingly generous terms that gradually tighten like a noose around the necks of struggling shopkeepers. But what choice do you have? Then what would you suggest, you ask, echoing her earlier question. She's silent for a long moment, her clever mind working through the limited options. Finally, she stands up straighter, decision made. I'll speak to Mrs. Crawford tomorrow. She's been hinting that she needs help with her correspondence. Her eyes aren't what they were. I could do an hour or two in the evenings, reading letters, writing responses. Your pride rebels at the thought of your wife taking on extra work when she already labours from dawn till dusk. But pride doesn't pay the landlord. Just until the millers settle their account, you say, making it a condition rather than a surrender, and only if she pays in advance. Sarah nods, and the matter is settled, for now. Another crisis postponed, another patch on the slowly sinking boat that is your business. The ledger closed, you follow your wife upstairs to the modest rooms that are home to your family of 5. The smell of potato soup greets you, inexpensive but filling, bulked out with vegetables from the shop that were too wilted to sell but still perfectly edible. The evening meal is a brief affair. Everyone is too tired for much conversation, and the spectre of tomorrow's work looms large. After the dishes are cleared, Richard and Emily tackle their schoolwork at the small table while your wife mends a tear in your younger son's only good shirt. 7-year-old Alfred is already asleep, exhausted from his day at school. You use this rare, quiet moment to update the inventory list for tomorrow's market order. Every item must be carefully considered. How much sold today? How much is likely to sell tomorrow? What's in danger of spoiling? What special orders need to be filled? It's a complex equation with too many variables, and a mistake either way is costly. Order too little and you lose sales. Order too much and you risk waste. By 9 o'clock, the children are in bed, though Richard has extracted a promise that he can accompany you to the market tomorrow. At 12, Emily should be focusing on her education rather than shopkeeping, but Richard shows a natural aptitude for the business. Whether that's a blessing or a curse, you're not entirely sure. Will you come up soon? Sarah asks, pausing at the door to your bedroom. She looks exhausted, the lines around her eyes deeper than they were a year ago. Just need to finish these orders, you reply, though you both know it's an excuse. The quiet of the shop after hours is the only time you have to yourself, the only moments to think without the constant demands of customers and family. Once she's gone, you reach under the desk and pull out a small tin box, unlocking it with the key you keep on a chain around your neck. Inside is a folded piece of paper, the mortgage on the shop. 6 more years of payments before it's truly yours, if you survive that long. Next to the mortgage is a small booklet, Richard's school report. The boy is bright, brighter than you ever were. His teachers say he could go far with the right education, the kind of education that costs money you don't have. You refold the papers and lock the box away again. No point dwelling on what can't be changed. But as you finish the market orders, a new thought takes root in your mind. Perhaps Wilson isn't the only option for a loan. Perhaps there's another way to secure the future. Not just for the shop, but for Richard. The thought is still with you the next morning as you and Richard make your way through the pre-dawn streets toward the market. The boy chatters excitedly beside you, his breath clouding in the cool morning air, oblivious to the weight of decisions resting on your shoulders. The market is already bustling when you arrive, a chaotic swirl of carts, barrows, shouting men, and bleary-eyed shopkeepers like yourself. You head straight for Jenkins's stall, Richard trailing behind, wide-eyed at the colourful profanity being exchanged over a disputed crate of oranges. "Gibbs!" Jenkins calls when he spots you. "Expected you earlier. Best stuff goes quick. You know that." "Had to stop at the bank," you lie smoothly. No need to let him know you're running late because you spent half an hour staring at the ceiling, turning over options in your mind. "What have you got for me today?" The next hour is a carefully choreographed negotiation. Jenkins shows you his wares, some excellent, some mediocre, some clearly on their last legs. You inspect, haggle, accept or reject. It's a game you've played thousands of times, each of you trying to get the better end of the deal while maintaining the relationship you both depend on. "These apples are half bruised," you comment, turning one over in your hand. "I couldn't possibly offer more than 6pence a dozen." "Highway robbery," Jenkins clutches his chest in mock outrage. "They're worth twice that. Fallen from the tree yesterday they did. Yesterday, last month maybe." You set the apple down. "But I'm feeling generous. 7pence and I'll take 2 dozen. Back and forth it goes, a dance of exaggerated reactions and incremental concessions. Richard watches, absorbing every nuance. By the end, you've secured a decent selection of produce at prices that will allow for a small profit, assuming everything sells before it spoils. "One more thing," you say, as Jenkins' boy begins loading your purchases onto the handcart you've brought. "About our terms." Jenkins' jovial expression fades slightly. This is no longer part of the game. "What about 'em?" You explain your situation. Cash flow temporarily tight, good customers with delayed payments, just need a little extension on credit terms. Jenkins listens without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. 2 weeks, he says finally. "I can give you 2 weeks on this order, but I'll need payment in full before the next one." It's not as much as you'd hoped for, but it's something. You shake hands on it, sealing the agreement in the traditional way. No contracts, no paperwork, just the word of 2 men who know that reputation is currency in this world. As you and Richard begin the journey back to the shop, cart laden with goods, you spot a familiar figure across the market. Wilson himself, not his son this time, inspecting a crate of exotic pineapples. Such luxury items are beyond your means, but Wilson's wealthy customers will pay handsomely for them. "That's Mr. Wilson, isn't it?" Richard asks, following your gaze. "His shop has one of those new ice boxes. Billy told me they can keep meat fresh for days." "So I've heard," you reply neutrally, steering the cart in the opposite direction. No need for a confrontation, especially not with Richard present, but Wilson has spotted you. He hands the pineapple back to the seller and makes his way through the crowd toward you. his expensive coat and gold watch chain marking him as a man of substance amid the working folk of the market. "Gibbs, just the man," his voice booms with artificial bonhomie. "Been meaning to have a word." You stop the cart, forcing a polite smile. "Mr. Wilson, good morning, and this must be your boy." Wilson claps Richard on the shoulder with unwarranted familiarity. "Following in father's footsteps, are you, lad?" Richard looks to you for guidance on how to respond. You give him a slight nod. "Yes, sir," he says politely. "I help in the shop." Good, good. Nothing like learning the trade from the ground up. Wilson turns his attention back to you. "I wonder if I might have a moment of your time, Gibbs." Man to man. You hesitate, glancing at Richard, then at your cart full of produce that needs to get back to the shop before the sun rises too high and begins to wilt the greens. "Perhaps another time, Mr. Wilson. We're rather pressed this morning." "It won't take but a minute," he insists, his joviality taking on a slightly harder edge. "Richard here can manage the cart for a bit, can't you, my boy?" Before you can object, Wilson has steered you several paces away, just out of Richard's earshot. His voice drops, the pretense of friendliness fading. "I'll be direct, Gibbs. I've heard you're in a bit of a tight spot. Landlord breathing down your neck, suppliers getting impatient. It happens to the best of us." Your spine stiffens. How does he know your private business? Then again, market gossip travels faster than telegrams in this world. Jenkins must have mentioned your request for extended terms to someone who told someone else who, "My affairs are in perfect order, thank you," you reply coldly. Wilson raises an eyebrow, clearly disbelieving. Of course, but should you find yourself in need of assistance, my door is always open. I have a proposition that could benefit us both. There it is, the opening gambit in Wilson's familiar game. First comes the friendly offer of help, then the gradual takeover of a struggling business, and finally another independent shopkeeper, reduced to a manager in Wilson's growing empire. "I appreciate your concern," you say, every word coated in ice, "but I'm quite capable of managing my own shop." Wilson's smile doesn't falter, but his eyes harden slightly. "As you wish, but the offer stands. The high street is changing, Gibbs. Modern methods, modern equipment, that's the future. The old ways." He gestures vaguely toward your handcart. "Well, progress waits for no man." With a tip of his hat, he's gone, melting back into the market crowd. You return to Richard, who's watching you with curious eyes. "What did Mr. Wilson want, father?" You take the handles of the cart, resuming your journey. Nothing important, just business talk. But as you navigate the increasingly busy streets back toward your shop, Wilson's words echo in your mind. The high street is changing. The old ways are disappearing. Are you just another relic, stubbornly clinging to a dying trade? What future are you offering Richard if you insist on him following your path? By the time you reach the shop, Sarah and Emily have everything ready for opening. The counters are scrubbed, the window display refreshed with the best of yesterday's unsold goods arranged to look appealing and abundant. Alfred has been packed off to school, and the day's first loaf of bread is cooling on the rack. Sarah's own baking, a skill that saves you from having to stock the baker's more expensive offerings. "Good haul?" she asks, as you and Richard begin unloading the cart. "Decent," you reply, hefting a sack of potatoes onto your shoulder. "Jenkins gave us 2 weeks on the payment." A small relief crosses her face, quickly hidden. "That should see us through until the Millers settle their account." "And if they don't?" The question slips out before you can stop it. She meets your eyes steadily. "Then we'll manage. We always do." Her quiet confidence steadies you, as it has countless times over the years. Whatever schemes Wilson might be hatching, whatever changes are coming to the high street, you have this, a partnership forged through 2 decades of shared struggle and small triumphs. The shop bell jingles as you unlock the door for the day's first customer. Mrs. Turner, the midwife, always stops by on her way to check on new mothers in the neighbourhood. "Morning, Mr. Gibbs, Mrs. Gibbs," she calls cheerfully. "Lovely day, isn't it? I'll have a 1/4 pound of tea if you please, and any news you might have of the Campbell baby. I'm headed there next and like to be prepared." And just like that, you're back in the rhythm of the day. The ledger's worrying figures, Wilson's veiled threats, the leaking pickle barrel, all recede as you slip into the familiar role of shopkeeper, neighbourhood fixture, repository of local information and small comforts. "The Campbell baby is thriving," Sarah says, measuring tea into a paper twist. "Mrs. Parker was in yesterday and said she's never seen a healthier 3-month-old, but the mother is struggling with the older one. Jealous, you know how they get." Mrs. Turner nods sagely, and the exchange of information continues. Births, deaths, illnesses, recoveries, all the small dramas that make up the life of your community. This too is part of your stock in trade. In a world before newspapers reached everyone and telephones connected households, the local shop is a clearinghouse for information and the shopkeeper a curator of neighbourhood knowledge. As the morning progresses, you find yourself watching Richard more closely than usual. The boy has Wilson's words affected you more than you'd like to admit. Richard works alongside you, learning as you learned from your own father. The feel of good produce, the subtle signs of turning milk, the art of cutting cheese so each slice appears generous while carefully controlling the actual weight. Is this enough? Should he be spending more time with his books, preparing for a different life? Or is there still value in these old skills, this ancient trade that has connected communities since the first markets formed in the first towns? The answer eludes you, lost in the press of customers and the constant calculations of stock and sales that fill your working hours. But the question remains, hovering at the edges of your thoughts as the day wears on and the afternoon customers begin to arrive. The afternoon stretches on like an endless ribbon of transactions, requests, and the occasional moment of genuine human connection. Your feet have gone beyond pain to a strange, numb tingling that you've come to recognize as your body's surrender to the reality of standing for 12 hours straight. Mrs. Peterson arrives at 3:30, immaculately dressed as always, to place her order for her dinner party. She's one of your most profitable customers, wealthy enough to buy without checking prices, socially ambitious enough to require the finest ingredients regardless of season or availability. "I'll need the best cut of beef you can find, Mr. Gibbs," she says, barely glancing at the meat selection. "It's for the bank manager and his wife, so it must be impressive." "I have a fine joint coming in tomorrow morning, Mrs. Peterson," you assure her, though in truth you have no idea what the butcher will have available. "You'll have to send Richard at dawn to secure something suitable, probably at a premium price. Selected personally for you." She nods, satisfied. "And fresh asparagus, if possible. Mrs. Wilson served it last week, and I simply must match her." Your heart sinks. Asparagus in late May is ruinously expensive, but Mrs. Peterson is not a customer you can disappoint. "I'll do my best," you promise, mentally calculating how early you'll need to be at the market to outbid the other shopkeepers for the few bundles available. The list grows longer. Imported oranges for a centerpiece, the best butter for baking, French mustard for the beef. Each item represents a separate challenge, a potential crisis if unavailable, another chip away at your already thin margins to ensure her satisfaction. "Will there be anything else?" you ask when she finally pauses for breath. "Yes, actually. I heard from Mrs. Crawford that you might have access to some of that new American canned fruit, pineapple, I believe. It would be such a novelty for dessert." You freeze momentarily. Canned pineapple is exactly the sort of luxury item Wilson stocks that you cannot afford to carry. To admit you don't have it might send her to your competitor. As it happens, you say carefully, I had been considering bringing in a small selection of exotic canned goods. For special customers only, you understand. She preens slightly at the implication of exclusivity. If you'd like, I can make inquiries. It would be for tomorrow afternoon's delivery. That would be perfect, Mr. Gibbs. I knew I could count on you. As she leaves, satisfied with your promises, Sarah gives you a sharp look from where she's serving another customer. She heard every word and knows exactly what you've done, committed to sourcing a product you don't stock at a price you can't afford to avoid losing a valuable customer to Wilson's. The moment there's a lull, she corners you by the back room door. Canned pineapple. Thomas, that's absurd. We'd have to buy it from Wilson himself and at retail prices. I know. You rub your forehead where the day's persistent headache has intensified. But if we lose the Petersons to him, she sighs, the fight going out of her. I'll speak to Jenkins tomorrow. Maybe he knows someone who can get it wholesale at least. The mention of Jenkins reminds you of another problem. We need to settle his account before asking for more favours. I've already arranged to see Mrs. Crawford this evening, Sarah says. If she pays me in advance for the letter writing, that should cover enough to make a partial payment. You hate this. Your wife taking on extra work, the constant juggling of accounts, the dependency on the goodwill of suppliers who have their own financial pressures. But there's no alternative, not if you want to keep the shop afloat. The conversation is cut short by the arrival of the after-work crowd, men stopping on their way home for tobacco or a bit of cheese, mothers sending children for last-minute additions to dinner. This is one of your busiest periods, and there's no time for worrying about tomorrow's problems when today's customers need serving. Among the crowd is Mr. Harris, looking tired and drawn. His wife mentioned he'd lost his job at the factory, and you can see the strain of unemployment in the new lines on his face. Just a £1/4 of the cheapest bacon, he says quietly, placing a few coins on the counter, and... He hesitates, clearly uncomfortable. My wife mentioned you'd extended our credit. I wanted to thank you and to assure you we'll settle as soon as possible. You wave away his thanks, embarrassed by his gratitude for such a small kindness. Think nothing of it. We've known each other too long to worry about a few weeks here or there. What you don't say is that you're extending credit you can barely afford yourself, that your own suppliers are growing impatient, that the landlord has threatened to raise the rent again. Mr. Harris has enough worries without carrying yours as well. You cut him a slightly larger portion of bacon than he's paid for, not enough to be obvious charity, just a small buffer against hunger for his family. Sarah, watching from the corner of her eye, adds an extra potato to his purchase with the same unspoken understanding. These small acts of community support are woven into the fabric of your business. They don't appear in the ledger, can't be calculated in profit and loss, but they're as much a part of being a shopkeeper as weighing flour and counting change. As the shop finally begins to empty for the evening lull before the last-minute customers, Emily appears at your elbow with a cup of tea. She's been watching you massage your temples and recognizes the signs of a headache building. "Thank you, love," you murmur, taking a grateful sip. The tea is weak. You're still reusing leaves to save money, but the warmth and momentary rest are blissful. Emily doesn't leave immediately. She hovers beside you, clearly working up the courage to say something. "What is it?" you ask, recognizing the familiar expression of a child with a request they expect to be denied. "Mrs. Wilson came in while you were helping Mr. Harris," she says hesitantly. "The butcher's wife, not the grocer's wife." You nod. Mrs. Wilson is the local gossip, even more prolific than Mr. Crawford in spreading neighbourhood news, though with less reliability. She was telling Mother about a position that's open at the post office for a girl who can write well and do sums. Emily takes a deep breath. It pays 5 shillings a week. 5 shillings a week, more than you can afford to pay her for working in the shop where her labour is technically free as a daughter's duty to the family business. The implications hang in the air between you. I see. You set down your teacup carefully. And you're interested in this position? She nods, not quite meeting your eyes. Miss Thompson at school says I have a fine hand, and I'm quick with figures. You always say so yourself. It's true. Emily has a sharp mind for numbers, often spotting errors in your calculations before you do. In another world, another time, she might have been a bookkeeper or a teacher. In this world, she's a shopkeeper's daughter, expected to help in the family business until she marries and starts her own family. It would only be during school holidays at first, she adds quickly, sensing your hesitation, and I'd give most of the money to help with the shop, of course. Your initial instinct is to refuse. You need her help, especially with Sarah taking on evening work with Mrs. Crawford. But 5 shillings a week, that would cover the coal bill with a bit left over, and the post office is respectable employment for a girl, better than many alternatives. Let me discuss it with your mother, you say finally. We'll need to think about how we'd manage without you during those hours. Her face lights up. Not a yes, but not the immediate no she was expecting. Thank you, Father. She darts away to help a customer who's just entered, a spring in her step that wasn't there before. You watch her, a strange mixture of pride and melancholy settling in your chest. Your children are growing up, developing ambitions beyond the confines of the shop that has defined your family's life for so long. The evening rush begins as workers head home, stopping to purchase items for dinner or the next day's lunch. This is your last chance to sell perishable goods before they're unsellable, so you focus on moving the items that won't last another day. These tomatoes are particularly fine today, you tell Mrs. Collins, steering her away from the fresher ones that will hold till tomorrow, perfect for a stew. They look a bit soft, she says doubtfully, poking at one. That's when they're sweetest, you assure her, and I can let you have them at a special price. The small deception sits uneasily, but what's the alternative? Throw away food that's still perfectly edible, losing the money you paid for it? The tomatoes are indeed a bit past their prime, but still good for cooking. It's not dishonesty, you tell yourself, just selective emphasis. By 7 o'clock, you've managed to sell most of the day's perishables. What remains will become tomorrow's dinner for your own family. Slightly wilted greens transformed into soup, overripe fruit stewed with sugar to preserve it another day. I'm going to Mrs. Crawford's now, Sarah says, untying her shop apron and smoothing down her dress. I should be back by 9. Take Richard with you, you say, glancing outside where the evening shadows are lengthening. It's getting dark. She nods, calling for your son who's sweeping the shop floor. And Emily mentioned the post office position, she adds in a lower voice. We should discuss it later. After they leave, you and Emily begin the closing routine, counting the till, wiping down counters, covering the remaining produce to protect it overnight. Alfred returns from playing at a neighbour's house, his knees dirty and his eyes heavy with tiredness. Wash up and help your sister, you tell him, ruffling his hair. Then it's bed for you, young man. He makes a token protest, but is too tired to put up much resistance. At 7, he's still young enough that the shop holds little interest for him beyond the occasional sweet you slip him when customers aren't looking. Just as you're about to lock the front door, a frantic knocking interrupts the peace of the closing routine. Outside stands young Billy, the butcher's boy, red-faced and out of breath. Mr. Gibbs, Mr. Peters sent me. There's trouble at the market. Your stomach clenches. What kind of trouble? Health inspector, Billy pants. Surprise visit. Found bad meat at Johnson's stall. Now they're checking everyone. Mr. Peters says not to count on your usual order tomorrow. They've confiscated half his stock already. This is a disaster. The Petersons' dinner party. All your regular customers expecting their usual cuts of meat. How will you explain the shortage? And more importantly, how will you make up for the lost sales? "Thank you, Billy," you say, pressing a penny into his hand. "Tell Mr. Peters I'll come by first thing tomorrow to see what he can spare." As Billy scampers off, you close and lock the door, leaning against it for a moment with your eyes closed, just when you thought things couldn't get more complicated. "What is it, Father?" Emily asks, pausing in her work, dish towel in hand. "Nothing for you to worry about," you say automatically, though you know she's old enough to understand the precariousness of your situation. "Just a small problem with tomorrow's deliveries." She studies your face, clearly not believing the reassurance, but doesn't press further. Instead, she returns to drying the measuring cups and scales, her movements methodical and precise. You retreat to the back room, pulling out the order book to assess the damage. Without meat, tomorrow's sales will be significantly reduced. The Petersons might take their entire order to Wilson's if you can't provide the beef they've requested. Other customers will be disappointed, some angry. As you sit at the small desk, staring at the columns of figures that suddenly seem meaningless in the face of this new crisis, you become aware of a sound from the shop. Emily, humming softly as she works. It's a simple tune, one your mother used to sing when you were a child, helping in her shop before you inherited the business. The familiar melody tugs at something inside you, a reminder that this is not the first crisis your family has weathered, nor will it be the last. Your mother faced shortages, difficult customers, ruthless competitors. So did her father before her, and his father before that. Shopkeeping has never been an easy life, but it has been a life of connection, of service, of small moments of humanity amid the endless calculations of profit and loss. With a sigh, you close the order book and return to the shop to help Emily finish closing. The meat shortage is a problem for tomorrow. Tonight there are still tasks to complete, children to settle, and plans to make with Sarah when she returns. By 8 o'clock, Alfred is in bed, the shop is clean and ready for tomorrow, and you're sitting at the small table in your living quarters, a cup of tea cooling beside you as you review the day's sales in the ledger. The figures are better than yesterday, but still not enough to cover all your expenses and outstanding debts. The street below has quieted, most shops closed for the night, though the pub at the corner is doing a brisk trade, judging by the laughter and occasional bursts of song drifting up to your open window. The gas lamps have been lit, casting pools of yellow light along the cobblestones. Your reverie is interrupted by a gentle knock at the door connecting the shop to your living quarters. Emily enters, carrying a plate with a thick slice of bread and some cheese. "You didn't eat dinner," she says simply, placing it beside your ledger. You realise she's right. In the rush to close the shop and deal with the news of the meat shortage, you forgot to eat. Your stomach growls appreciatively at the sight of food. "Thank you," you say, taking a bite of the bread. It's from yesterday, a little stale but still good. The cheese is from the batch that was beginning to turn. You've cut away the questionable parts, leaving just enough for a modest meal. Emily sits across from you, her hands folded in her lap. "Father," she begins hesitantly, "is the shop in trouble?" You consider lying, offering reassurances that everything is fine, protecting her from adult worries, but she's 12, nearly 13, and she's grown up in this business. She sees more than you realise. "It's challenging right now," you admit, choosing your words carefully. "The new shops like Wilson's make it harder for small businesses like ours, and there are always unexpected problems, like this meat shortage." She nods, absorbing this. "Is that why Mother is working for Mrs. Crawford?" "Partly. It's temporary, just until some of our customers settle their accounts." "And is that why you're considering letting me take the post office position? Because we need the money?" Her directness startles you. When did your little girl become so perceptive? The money would be helpful, you acknowledge, but that's not the only reason. If you want to work there, if you think you'd enjoy it and learn from it, that's important too. She seems to consider this, her young face serious in the lamplight. I think I would enjoy it. Miss Thompson says I have a natural aptitude for clerical work. Then we'll discuss it with your mother when she returns. No decisions tonight. Emily nods, satisfied for now. She stands to leave but pauses at the door. Father, I don't mind helping in the shop, you know. I like it, mostly. But sometimes I wonder what, love? What else I might be good at? What else I might do if I had the chance? The simple honesty of her statement strikes you like a physical blow. Isn't that what every parent wants for their child? The chance to discover their talents, to build a life of their own choosing. But the reality of your situation, the financial pressures, the expectations of society, all conspire to limit those choices. We'll find a way, you promise, though you're not entirely sure what you're promising or how you'll keep it. Now off to bed with you. Tomorrow will be a busy day. After she's gone, you sit in the quiet room, finishing your simple meal and staring at the ledger without really seeing it. Emily's words echo in your mind, mingling with Richard's earlier enthusiasm for the shop, Alfred's childish indifference, Sarah's quiet determination to keep everything afloat. What kind of future are you building for them? What kind of legacy will this struggling shop be? The questions have no easy answers, but they're interrupted by the sound of the street door opening downstairs, Sarah and Richard returning from Mrs. Crawford's. You close the ledger and head down to meet them, pushing aside the larger worries for the immediate question of whether Mrs. Crawford has paid for Sarah's services in advance, as hoped. One crisis at a time, one day at a time, the shopkeeper's way. Sarah's face tells you everything before she even speaks. The lines around her eyes have deepened and there's a tightness to her mouth that speaks of disappointment carefully contained. Mrs. Crawford was very pleasant, she says, as the three of you climb the stairs to your living quarters. She has a considerable backlog of correspondence that needs attention. And the payment, you ask? Though you already know the answer. She shakes her head slightly. She insists on paying at the end of the week, once she's satisfied with the work. I tried to explain our situation, but... She trails off, the frustration evident in her voice. Richard looks between you, sensing the tension. At 10, he's old enough to understand financial worries, young enough to still believe his parents can solve any problem. I could take on more deliveries, he offers earnestly. Mr. Thompson at the bookshop asked if I could help with his packages on Saturdays. He said he'd pay 3p for the afternoon. The simple generosity of his offer tugs at your heart. That's good of you, son. We'll talk about it tomorrow. For now, wash up and get ready for bed. Once Richard has gone to join his siblings, you and Sarah sit at the small table, speaking in low voices to avoid waking the children. What about the meat shortage? She asks, having heard the news from Richard during their walk home. You sigh, running a hand through your hair. It's bad. Health inspectors found something at Johnson's stall and now they're checking everyone. Peters has lost half his stock already. The Petersons' dinner party. I know. And the canned pineapple. You almost laugh at how absurd it sounds. Worrying about exotic fruit when you might not have basic meat to sell tomorrow. Sarah reaches across the table and takes your hand. Her fingers work roughened but warm. We'll manage. We always do. It's her refrain, the words she's repeated through a dozen crises over the years. Sometimes you wonder if she truly believes it or simply says it because one of you needs to maintain hope. I'll go to the market at 4 tomorrow, you decide. See what Peters can spare. Maybe I can find another butcher who hasn't been hit as hard. And the pineapple. You hesitate. The sensible thing would be to tell Mrs. Peterson it's unavailable, to focus on securing the essentials, but losing her custom to Wilson's would be a significant blow. I'll see Jenkins first. If he can't help, then you don't finish the sentence. But you both know what it means. You'll have to swallow your pride and buy from Wilson at retail prices, taking a loss on the sale just to keep the Petersons' business. Sarah squeezes your hand before releasing it. I should check on the butter for tomorrow. It needs reworking. The mundane task of butter preparation is a welcome distraction from the larger worries. You follow her to the small pantry off the main room, where earthenware crocks hold your dairy products in the coolest spot in the house. Butter management is a constant battle in a world without refrigeration. The top layer inevitably starts to turn, developing a rancid taste and smell that would repel customers. The solution is a daily ritual of scraping off the spoiled portion, reworking the remainder with a wooden paddle, adding a sprinkle of salt as preservative, and reshaping it into neat blocks for sale. Sarah uncovers the largest crock and wrinkles her nose slightly at the smell. Not too bad today, she says, reaching for the paddle. The cooler weather helps. You watch as she expertly scrapes away the discoloured top layer, setting it aside. Emily told me about the post office position, you say as Sarah works the remaining butter into a smooth mass. Her hands pause momentarily, then resume their rhythmic movement. What did you tell her? That we'd discuss it. She seems quite keen. Sarah is silent for a moment, concentrating on her task. 5 shillings a week would make a difference, she says finally, and it's respectable work, better than some alternatives. The unspoken thought hangs between you that if the shop continues to struggle, all your children might need to find outside employment sooner rather than later. Many families in your neighbourhood have already sent children as young as 12 to factories or domestic service, financial necessity overriding parental desire to provide education and a better future. But she's so young, Sarah continues, shaping the butter into a neat rectangular block with practiced movements. And she's bright, Thomas, brighter than I was at her age. With proper schooling, she could become a teacher, perhaps. The hope in her voice is painful to hear. You both know that extended education for Emily would require money you don't have, sacrifices you're not sure you can make. Let's see how the post office position works out, you suggest. It's only during school holidays at first. If she shows aptitude, perhaps it could lead to something more. Sarah nods, accepting this compromise. She wraps the finished butter block in damp muslin cloth and returns it to the crock, covering it carefully to keep it as cool as possible. We should get some sleep, she says, wiping her hands on her apron. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion to contend with. But sleep, when it finally comes after you've checked the locks, banked the fire, and settled into your narrow bed, is fitful and unsatisfying. Your mind refuses to quiet, spinning through scenarios for tomorrow. How to secure meat from Peter's, where to find canned pineapple at a price that won't entirely erase your profit margin, what to tell Mrs. Peterson if you fail at either task. You drift in and out of consciousness, half-formed dreams mingling with worries until the two are indistinguishable. At one point, you find yourself mentally calculating how many weeks the shop could survive if you sold Sarah's mother's brooch, the small cache of sovereigns hidden beneath the loose floorboard under your bed, and the gold watch that was your father's only legacy to you. The answer is not encouraging. When you finally surrender to wakefulness around 3 a.m, Sarah is already up, moving quietly around the room as she dresses in the dark. Couldn't sleep either, you whisper, careful not to wake Alfred, who shares your room now that he's too old for the nursery. I'm coming with you to the market, she says, her tone brooking no argument. 4 eyes are better than 2 when it comes to finding bargains, and I can speak to Jenkins about the pineapple while you deal with Peters." The simple practicality of her approach steadies you. This is how you've always functioned best, as partners, each playing to their strengths, neither too proud to lean on the other when necessary. You dress quickly in the dark, the familiar movements requiring no light. Downstairs, you find bread and cheese laid out. Sarah's doing, always thinking ahead to ensure neither of you faces the grueling market trip on an empty stomach. The streets are eerily quiet as you lock the shop door behind you. Even the night soil men have finished their malodorous work of collecting human waste from backyard privies, and the first delivery carts haven't yet begun their rounds. The only sounds are your footsteps on the cobblestones and the occasional rustle of a rat in the gutter. "I spoke to Emily last night," you say, as you walk briskly toward the market, "about the post office position." Sarah glances at you, her face half illuminated by a distant gas lamp. And she's not just thinking about the money. She genuinely wants to try something different to see what she might be good at beyond the shop. Sarah sighs, her breath clouding in the cool pre-dawn air. She's growing up. They all are. Richard loves the business, but Emily, she has her own mind. Like her mother, you say, allowing a small smile despite the seriousness of the conversation. "I was never given choices," Sarah replies after a moment. "From shop girl to shopkeeper's wife, my path was decided by circumstance rather than inclination. I don't regret it, Thomas," she adds quickly, seeing your expression, "but I wonder sometimes what might have been if I'd had more options." The honest vulnerability in her voice strikes you. In 20 years of marriage, Sarah has rarely spoken of regrets or unfulfilled dreams. She's always been the practical one, focused on the present challenges rather than past disappointments or future what-ifs. "What would you have chosen?" you ask, genuinely curious. "If circumstances had been different?" She considers this as you turn onto the main road leading to the market, the distant glow of its early lamps now visible in the darkness. "I liked numbers," she says finally. "Account books, calculations. My father's friend was an accountant, and I used to watch him work when he visited our shop. The way the columns all balanced in the end, the orderliness of it, I found it satisfying. You're certainly better with the ledger than I am," you acknowledge. "Half the time I'm ready to throw the damn thing out the window." She laughs softly. "That's because you see limitations in the numbers. I see possibilities." The simple insight gives you pause. It's true. You look at the ledger and see all the things you can't afford, the narrow margins that constrain your choices. Sarah looks at the same figures and finds ways to stretch them, to reallocate, to keep the fragile boat of your business afloat one more day. Perhaps Emily inherits that from you, you suggest, that aptitude for figures. Perhaps. Sarah's voice softens. "But whatever talents she has, Thomas, I want her to have the chance to discover them fully, not just settle for what necessity dictates." The conversation fades as you approach the market, already stirring with early activity despite the ungodly hour. Porters unload carts piled high with produce from outlying farms, fishmongers arrange their catches on beds of ice, and a handful of shopkeepers like yourselves circulate with handcarts, eager to secure the best goods before they're claimed. You squeeze Sarah's hand once before you separate. She headed toward Jenkins' stall to inquire about the canned pineapple, you making a beeline for Peter's butcher stand. The familiar routine of the market takes over, inspecting, haggling, calculating. The comfort of well-practiced movements temporarily displaces the deeper concerns about your children's futures, the shop's viability, Wilson's looming threat to your livelihood. Peters looks as tired as you feel, his normally ruddy face drawn and pale in the early light. Gibbs, he greets you without his usual heartiness. Bad business yesterday. So I heard. How bad is it? He gestures to his dramatically reduced stock. Where normally sides of beef would hang in neat rows, now there are only a few smaller cuts. The lamb section is nearly empty, and even the cheaper cuts of pork are in short supply. All lost nearly half my inventory, Peters says grimly. They found tainted meat at Johnson's and decided to inspect everyone, looking for signs of preservation chemicals. He spits contemptuously, as if a little borax ever hurt anyone. You keep your face carefully neutral. The use of borax and other chemicals to disguise the smell and appearance of meat past its prime is common practice among less scrupulous butchers. You've suspected Peters of it occasionally, but never had confirmation until now. "What can you spare for me?" you ask, getting straight to business. "I have the Petersons' dinner party order and my regular customers." Peters scratches his stubbled chin. "For you, Gibbs, I can manage a small joint of beef, not as fine as I'd like, but it'll do for your Petersons, and some decent sausages for the regulars. That's the best I can offer today." It's less than you'd hoped for, but better than nothing. You negotiate a price slightly higher than usual given the scarcity and arrange for delivery later in the morning. As Peters wraps your purchases in paper, you casually inquire, "Heard anything about Wilson? Was he affected by the inspections?" Peters snorts. "That fancy shop of his? Barely touched. He's got that new icebox, keeps everything fresh as a daisy apparently. Inspector couldn't find fault with any of it." The information stings, reinforcing the growing gap between your traditional methods and the modern advantages your competitor enjoys. But there's no time to dwell on it. You need to find Sarah and see if she's had any luck with the pineapple situation. You find her at Jenkins's stall, deep in conversation with the supplier. From her animated gestures and Jenkins' thoughtful expression, it seems negotiations are well underway. You hang back, not wanting to interrupt what appears to be a promising discussion. Finally, Sarah shakes hands with Jenkins, the universal sign of a deal concluded, and turns to join you, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Success?" you ask hopefully. "Of a sort. He can get us a can of pineapple, but not until tomorrow morning. I've persuaded him to sell it to us at just above his cost, as a favour. The Petersons need it today for their dinner party." Sarah's smile widens slightly. "I know, which is why I suggested an alternative. Preserved ginger. It's exotic enough to impress their guests. Jenkins had it in stock, and I got it at a price that will still leave us a modest profit." You stare at her in admiration. While you were focused on the problem as presented, finding canned pineapple, Sarah found a creative solution that meets the underlying need for an impressive imported delicacy while working within the constraints of availability and cost. "Have I told you lately that you're brilliant?" you ask, only half joking. "Not since last Tuesday," she replies with a touch of her dry humour. "Now shall we see about those vegetables for the Petersons' order? If we're clever about it, we might find asparagus that won't bankrupt us." The market expedition continues, each of you applying years of experience and hard-earned knowledge to stretch limited funds into sufficient stock for the day ahead. By the time the sun has properly risen, your handcart is loaded with the day's purchases. Not as abundant as you'd like, but enough to meet your most pressing needs. As you make your way back to the shop, the streets now bustling with early morning activity, Sarah fills you in on the rest of her negotiations with Jenkins. He's agreed to extend our credit another week, but he was firm about needing payment before the next delivery. And he mentioned that Wilson has been buying in larger quantities, getting better prices as a result. "Of course he has," you mutter, the familiar resentment bubbling up. "Probably gets everything at half what we pay." It's not just the quantity, Sarah says thoughtfully, it's his storage capacity. With that icebox and his larger stockroom, he can buy more at once, keep it longer. We're limited by what we can sell in a day or two before spoilage. It's a point you've considered before, but hearing Sarah articulate it so clearly brings the fundamental disadvantage of your position into sharp relief. It's not just about Wilson's fancier shop or broader selection, it's about the structural advantages that modern equipment provides. Advantages that require capital investment you simply cannot afford. What if, Sarah begins, then hesitates. What if what? She seems to be choosing her words carefully. What if we considered a small expansion, not anything dramatic, but perhaps converting part of the back room into a proper cold storage area, with ice deliveries like Wilson has? The suggestion startles you. Sarah is usually the conservative one when it comes to business decisions, cautious about any expenditure that isn't absolutely necessary. The cost would be considerable, you point out, and where would we put all the stock currently in the back room? We could reorganize, be more efficient with the space. She's clearly given this some thought. As for the cost, yes, it would be an investment, but think of what we could save in reduced spoilage alone, not to mention the ability to buy in larger quantities at better prices. Where would the money come from? It's the fundamental question, the one that stops so many of your aspirations in their tracks. Sarah is quiet for a moment as you navigate around a group of school children heading to the day's lessons. My mother's brooch, she says finally, and perhaps a small loan. Not from Wilson, you say immediately, remembering her vehement opposition to the idea just yesterday. No, not from Wilson, but the building society might consider a small business loan, especially if we had collateral. She pauses. Your father's watch, perhaps, and I have my grandmother's pearls hidden away. They're not worth much, but combined with the brooch, the fact that she's willing to part with these family treasures, these small links to a more prosperous past, shows how seriously she's considering this idea. It's not a spur-of-the-moment suggestion, but something she's been contemplating for some time. Let me think about it, you say, as you turn onto your street, the shop now visible in the distance. It's a big decision. Sarah nods, accepting your caution. Of course, but Thomas, we can't keep going as we are indefinitely. Something has to change. The simple truth of her statement hangs between you as you approach the shop, where Emily is already up and visible through the window, preparing for the day's business. The sight of your daughter, diligently arranging displays without being asked, brings your earlier conversation about her future rushing back. Perhaps Sarah is right. Perhaps something does need to change, not just for the shop's survival, but for your children's futures. The question is whether you have the courage to risk what little security you have in pursuit of something better, something more sustainable for the family legacy you've worked so hard to build. As you unlock the shop door, the familiar bell jingling above your head, the weight of these decisions settles on your shoulders alongside the physical fatigue of the early morning market trip. There's no time to dwell on it now, though. The day's business awaits. Customers will soon arrive, and the immediate challenges of meat shortages and dinner party orders must take precedence over longer-term considerations. "Good morning, Father, Mother," Emily greets you, her face brightening at the sight of the full handcart. "You found everything we needed?" "Most of it," you reply, beginning to unload the precious cargo of meat, vegetables, and the exotic preserved ginger that will hopefully satisfy Mrs. Peterson's desire for an impressive imported delicacy. It's going to be an interesting day. The understatement brings a smile to both Emily and Sarah's faces. In the world of a Victorian shopkeeper, interesting usually means challenging, unpredictable, and requiring all the ingenuity and resilience the family can muster. As you settle into the familiar rhythm of opening procedures, arranging displays, weighing and packaging goods for the day's first customers, calculating prices that will balance profit against the need to move perishable stock quickly, you find yourself watching Emily with new eyes. Her movements are efficient, her attention to detail impressive. She's absorbed the lessons of shopkeeping through years of observation and practice, just as you did from your own parents. But is this the life she wants? Is this the future she would choose for herself if choice were truly available to her? The question lingers as the shop bell jingles, announcing the first customer of what promises to be another long, demanding day in the life of a Victorian shopkeeper. The day unfolds like countless others before it, a blur of transactions, conversations, calculations, and the constant battle against time and spoilage. By late afternoon, most of the immediate crises have been navigated, if not fully resolved. Mrs. Peterson was initially disappointed about the pineapple, but was ultimately charmed by Sarah's suggestion of preserved ginger as an exotic alternative. "Such a clever idea, Mrs. Gibbs," she exclaimed, examining the small jar with its ornate label. "Mrs. Wilson served pineapple last week, but this will be something entirely new. How fashionable." The meat shortage proved more challenging. Regular customers had to be gently informed that supplies were limited due to the health inspections, with promises of better selection tomorrow. Most accepted this with the resigned patience of people accustomed to the unpredictability of food availability. A few grumbled and mentioned Wilson's apparently unaffected stock, information you filed away with a tight smile and non-committal murmur. Now, as the evening customers begin to thin out, you find yourself watching the clock, anticipating the blessed relief of closing time. Your back aches with a deep, persistent throb that even your habitual stoic endurance can't fully ignore. 16 hours on your feet, day after day, year after year, exacts a physical toll that becomes harder to dismiss as you approach middle age. The bell above the door jingles, and you look up to see Mr. Miller entering the shop. Your heart lifts slightly. Perhaps he's come to settle his account earlier than promised. "Evening, Mr. Gibbs," he says, removing his hat. He looks tired, but less strained than the last time you saw him. "I was hoping to have a word." "Of course," you reply, gesturing to the quieter corner of the shop. "How can I help you?" Miller glances around, ensuring no other customers are within earshot. "I wanted to let you know that I've received payment for one of my larger contracts. I'll be able to settle our account in full tomorrow morning." The relief that washes over you is almost dizzying. The miller's outstanding balance will cover the landlord and leave enough to make a partial payment to Jenkins, easing your most pressing financial concerns. "That's excellent news, Mr. Miller. I appreciate you coming by to let me know. It's the least I could do, considering your patience." He hesitates, then adds, "Times have been difficult lately. Not all shopkeepers would have extended such understanding." You think of Wilson, who reportedly charges interest on delayed payments and has been known to publicly embarrass customers who fall behind. "We've known each other a long time," you say simply. "That counts for something in this neighborhood." Miller nods, replacing his hat. "Indeed it does, Mr. Gibbs. Indeed it does." After he leaves, you share the good news with Sarah, who's serving the last few customers of the day. Her relief mirrors your own, though she's more restrained in showing it. "That will see us through the week at least," she says quietly as she measures tea into a paper twist, and gives us time to consider the cold storage idea more carefully. By 8 o'clock, the shop is closed, the day's takings counted and recorded, and the family gathered around the small table upstairs for a late supper. The meal is simple: potato soup bulked out with vegetables that were too wilted to sell, and bread that's slightly stale, but perfectly edible when toasted over the fire. To the children, you add a rare treat, a small spoonful of jam that was near its selling date. A celebration, you explain when Sarah raises an eyebrow at this uncharacteristic extravagance. For good news about the miller's account, the children tuck in with enthusiasm, unaware of the financial concerns that shadow their parents' conversations. Alfred at 7 cares only that the jam is sweet. Richard and Emily, older and more perceptive, recognise the improved mood but know better than to ask direct questions about the shop's finances. As the meal concludes, you clear your throat, drawing everyone's attention. Your mother and I have been discussing some matters that affect the family. You begin, glancing at Sarah for confirmation. She nods encouragingly. First, Emily, about the post office position. Emily sits up straighter, her expression caught between hope and apprehension. We think it would be a good opportunity for you, if you're certain it's what you want. During school holidays only, mind you, and with the understanding that your education remains the priority. Emily's face lights up, a rare, unguarded moment of childish joy breaking through her usual serious demeanour. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Mother. I promise I'll work hard and I'll still help in the shop whenever I'm needed. We know you will, Sarah says warmly. Miss Thompson speaks highly of your abilities, and we're proud of you for earning this chance. You turn to Richard next. As for you, young man, Mr. Thompson at the bookshop asked about your help with deliveries on Saturdays? Richard nods eagerly. Yes, Father. 3p for the afternoon. I wouldn't be neglecting my duties here. I could do our deliveries in the morning and his after lunch. You consider this. Richard's assistance in the shop is valuable, but the additional income, small though it is, would help. More importantly, exposure to another type of business might broaden his understanding of commerce, useful knowledge whether he eventually takes over the family shop or pursues another path. You may try it for a month, you decide, if it doesn't interfere with your schoolwork or your responsibilities here. Richard's grin matches his sister's in brightness. Thank you, Father. I won't let you down. I know you won't. You ruffle his hair affectionately, a gesture he's beginning to consider himself too old for, but still secretly enjoys. Now, there's one more matter. Your mother and I are considering some changes to the shop. The children look at you with curiosity. Even Alfred pauses in licking jam from his spoon to listen. We're thinking about installing a cold storage area, Sarah explains. With regular ice deliveries, like Mr. Wilson's shop has, it would help keep our food fresher longer and allow us to buy more at better prices. Like a proper icebox? Richard asks, clearly impressed by the idea. That would be splendid. We could sell ice cream in summer, perhaps? You chuckle at his immediate leap to the commercial possibilities. Perhaps, though that's not the primary purpose, it would mainly help with preserving our existing stock. Meat, dairy, some vegetables. Would it be expensive? Emily asks, always practical. Is that why Mr. Miller's payment was important? Sarah and you exchange glances, slightly surprised at her insight. Yes, Sarah acknowledges. It would require an investment. We're still considering how best to manage it. I could contribute from my post office earnings, Emily offers immediately, and Richard from his bookshop work. The simple generosity of the offer, the automatic assumption that family resources should be pooled for the common good, touches you deeply. These children who have grown up watching their parents carefully count every penny understand the value of money and the importance of contribution in ways their wealthier counterparts likely never will. That's very thoughtful, you say, your voice a little gruff with emotion. But your mother and I will sort out the finances. Your earnings are your own, though we do expect you to save most of them for your futures. The discussion continues for a while longer, the children excitedly suggesting various uses for the cold storage, potential new products you could stock, ways to advertise the improvement to customers. Their enthusiasm is infectious, making what had seemed a daunting financial decision feel more like an exciting family adventure. Eventually, the hour grows late, and it's time for the younger children to retire. Alfred is already nodding off at the table, his small face smeared with the remnants of jam. Richard helps him up to bed while Emily stays behind to assist with clearing the table, her movements efficient and practiced. "Are you really going to do it, Father?" she asks quietly as she stacks the plates. "The cold storage?" You consider your answer carefully. "I think so, yes. Your mother makes a compelling case for it, and times are changing. We need to change with them, at least in some ways." Emily nods thoughtfully. "Mr. Wilson's shop is very modern," she observes, "but people still prefer coming to us. Mrs. Thompson says it's because we know their names and remember what they like. That's kind of Mrs. Thompson to say." It's true, though. Emily places the plates in the wash basin. "Mr. Wilson doesn't care about people the way you and Mother do. He just wants their money." The simple observation from a child's perspective crystallizes something you've been feeling but couldn't quite articulate. The competition with Wilson isn't just about modern equipment or pricing. It's about fundamental approaches to business. Your shop is embedded in the community, a relationship built on years of mutual support and understanding. Wilson's is merely a commercial enterprise, efficient but impersonal. Perhaps there's room for both models. The traditional shopkeeper who knows each customer's preferences and extends credit through hard times, and the modern retailer with lower prices and wider selection. Perhaps the key is not to try to become Wilson, but to selectively modernize while maintaining the personal connection that defines your business. The thought stays with you as you complete the evening routines, checking the locks, banking the fire, reviewing tomorrow's market list one final time. By the time you climb the narrow stairs to your bedroom, Sarah is already there, seated at the small dressing table, brushing her hair with slow, methodical strokes. The children seemed excited about the cold storage idea, you comment, sitting heavily on the edge of the bed to remove your shoes. Your feet throb with relief as they're finally freed after 16 hours of confinement. "They were," Sarah agrees, meeting your eyes in the small mirror. "Especially Richard. He has your head for business, that one. And Emily has your aptitude for figures. Alfred," you chuckle. "Alfred has yet to reveal his talents beyond an impressive capacity for jam." Sarah smiles, setting down her brush. "He's young yet. There's time." The simple statement carries layers of meaning in the context of your earlier conversations. Time for Alfred to discover his abilities. Time for Emily and Richard to explore opportunities beyond the shop. Time, perhaps, for you and Sarah to adapt the business to changing conditions, ensuring its survival not just for your sake, but for the children's futures. "I've been thinking about Wilson," you say as you change into your nightshirt, the coarse cotton soft with age and countless washings. "Have you?" Sarah's tone is neutral, but you can sense her interest. "Not about borrowing from him," you clarify quickly, "but about what makes our shop different from his, what we offer that he can't or won't. And what did you conclude?" You sit beside her on the small stool, your knees almost touching in the cramped space. That modernizing doesn't have to mean abandoning what works. We can have cold storage without becoming impersonal. We can adapt without losing our identity. Sarah's hand finds yours, her fingers intertwining with your own. "That's what I've been trying to say, though not as eloquently." "Hardly eloquent," you demur. "Just the ramblings of a tired shopkeeper." "A wise shopkeeper," she corrects gently. "One who understands that change and tradition aren't necessarily opposed." The conversation continues in murmured tones as you both prepare for bed, discussing practical details of the cold storage plan, where exactly it would go, how much ice would be needed, which suppliers might offer the best prices on the necessary equipment. The technical aspects are interspersed with broader reflections on the business, the children's futures, the changing nature of retail in your rapidly industrializing world. Finally, exhaustion overtakes you both and you settle into the narrow bed, your bodies finding the familiar contours worn into the mattress by years of shared rest. Sarah's breathing quickly deepens into the rhythm of sleep, her day's labors demanding immediate recovery. But despite your bone-deep weariness, sleep eludes you for a time. Your mind continues to work, calculating costs, planning tomorrow's orders, worrying about the landlord's threatened rent increase. The constant mental arithmetic of the shopkeeper never truly ceases, even in these quiet hours when the rest of the household slumbers. You think of Emily at the post office, her quick mind applied to new challenges beyond weighing produce and wrapping parcels. You picture Richard at the bookshop, perhaps discovering a love of literature alongside his natural business acumen. You imagine Alfred, still undefined, his future a blank page waiting to be written. And you think of the shop itself, the heart of your family's existence, the stage upon which your daily dramas unfold. It's more than a business. It's a legacy, a contribution to the community, a thread in the fabric of your neighborhood's life. Despite its struggles and limitations, despite Wilson's fancier premises and modern advantages, your little shop matters. The relationships forged across its counter, the trust built through years of fair dealing and mutual support, the simple human connections formed in the daily exchange of goods and conversation, these things have value beyond the figures in your ledger. As sleep finally begins to claim you, these thoughts soften into less defined impressions. The smell of fresh bread, the weight of coins in your palm, the sound of the shop bell announcing another neighbour's arrival, the taste of tea brewed from leaves used just once too often. The sensory memories of a shopkeeper's life, accumulated over decades of dawn-to-dusk labour, hundreds of thousands of small interactions that together form a life of quiet significance. Your last conscious thought before surrendering to sleep is not of ledgers or iceboxes or Wilson's competition, but of Richard's face as he carefully wrapped a package for an elderly customer that morning. The combination of concentration and kindness, the natural grace of service, rendered with genuine care. Whatever the future holds for your family and your shop, that moment contained something worth preserving, worth passing on. Perhaps that, ultimately, is the shopkeeper's true legacy, not the business itself with its perpetual struggles and modest rewards, but the values embodied in its operation: fairness, diligence, community, care for others expressed through the mundane exchange of goods for money, elevated by human connection into something approaching dignity. Not a bad legacy, all things considered. Not a bad life, despite its hardships. As the church clock strikes midnight, marking the official end of another day in the life of a Victorian shopkeeper, you finally drift into sleep, your body surrendering to exhaustion while your mind, ever practical, begins to plan tomorrow's market trip, tomorrow's stock rotation, tomorrow's careful dance of supply and demand, credit and payment, tradition and necessary change. The shop will open again at 6, the bell will jingle, the first customer will enter, and the cycle will begin anew. But for now, in these precious hours of darkness, even a shopkeeper may rest, gathering strength for the demands of another day. Unlike you, though, lying in your comfortable modern bed, the Victorian shopkeeper never truly escapes the physical toll of his profession, even in sleep. His hands, roughened by years of handling crates and barrels, occasionally twitch as he dreams of weighing sugar or counting coins. His back, permanently altered by decades of standing, cannot fully relax even in repose. His mind, trained to constant vigilance against waste and loss, processes the day's figures even as he slumbers. This was the reality for thousands of small shopkeepers throughout Victorian Britain, a life of unrelenting labour, narrow margins and constant adaptation to changing markets and customer needs. Their shops formed the backbone of communities, providing not just goods, but credit, information, and social connection in an era before welfare systems or mass communication. Few grew rich from their modest enterprises, but many, like your fictional shopkeeper, found meaning in the service they provided, the families they supported, and the relationships they built across their counters. Their legacy lives on in the small, independent shops that still dot high streets and corners, stubbornly persisting in the age of supermarkets and online retail, a testament to the enduring value of personal service and community connection. So as you drift off to sleep, spare a thought for those Victorian shopkeepers whose dawn-to-dusk labours helped shape the retail landscape we know today. Their struggles with food preservation without refrigeration, their battles against spoilage and waste, their careful calculations of profit and loss, all part of a largely unsung history of small business that built and sustained communities through decades of rapid social change. And with that, close your eyes and drift off to sleep.